There are people who need risk and adrenaline to live. That was the case of Lucas, Alba, Julio, and Sebastián. They had studied criminology together, but soon realized that what they liked was something else. It also had to do with mysteries, but with some more inexplicable ones. They became friends in their first year of college, and in their second year they already shared all kinds of plans. This is how they discovered a ghost hunting YouTuber. At first they made meetings to watch their reports. He traveled all over the world trying to record or hear something supernatural, and they were amazed by each of his videos. But soon, seeing them was not enough and they wanted to take action. They started with locations near their town. The abandoned monastery, the cemetery, and some of them they thought they saw things, but the truth is that they had no way to prove it. Perhaps it was simply their desire to experience extreme sensations that led them to think that they had seen ghosts. But everything changed when they traveled 300 kilometers from their homes to spend the night in an abandoned Burger King. They had found several articles claiming that terrible things had happened there. Several people had died in unexplained conditions in the surrounding area, and no YouTuber had dared to enter there. It wasn't just any Burger King. It had several floors, a games area, large rooms for parties. The urban legends about the paranormal events that occurred there were so many that even the neighbors who lived nearby moved to other towns, and the area had been practically deserted. The idea of researching there excited them so much that they spent 3 weeks preparing everything. They spent all their savings on cameras with night vision, powerful microphones, and even a knife to defend themselves if necessary. They knew that a knife would be of little use to them when facing a ghost, but it was also because of the feeling of protection that the object generated in them. With everything ready, they decided to print a map on the premises and draw up a plan. The plan was that one of them would stay outside, watching, and with a cell phone ready to call and ask for help. He would do it from the car in case they had to flee in a hurry. No one wanted to stay in the vehicle, so they would do 2 shifts and draw lots. The others would be together all the time. They wouldn't be separated for absolutely anything. They told their parents that they were going to a rural house for the weekend, and they left. They had to spend a fortune on gasoline, but they didn't care because they were going to carry out their first real mission. When they got there, it was practically night. They grabbed all their equipment and Lucas, Alba, and Julio prepared to enter while Sebastián took the first watch in the car. When Alba touched the doorknob, she thought she had never felt so good in her life. She was so excited. But right when she opened it, everything became terrifying. Although none of them said anything, that dirty environment full of broken tables and chairs and with multiple graffiti on the walls caused them real panic. There was no trace of the colorful and cheerful atmosphere of its current premises. Some partitions had been knocked down, so the idea they had developed following their plan couldn't be carried out. They chatted for a moment about the next step to take, and the 3 decided to inspect the upstairs first. Julio had the camera recording from minute 0. Alba had a smaller one, and the 3 of them had several activated microphones. Lucas grabbed a fairly powerful flashlight. The first area they entered looked like a games room. There were many balls and dolls on the floor, and they were all missing something. Some without an arm, others without a leg. The walls were stained with moisture and with some indecipherable marks. But they didn't see anything else. They continued and wanted to enter the second room, the one that corresponded to the event area, but it seemed blocked. That didn't make sense because it didn't have a hole for a key, and no one could lock it from the inside because the place was completely abandoned. Julio then remembered that they had a lever in the car, with which they could open it. He changed the camera to Alba so that she could keep the good one, and he left. He went down the stairs as fast as he could, so fast that he didn't notice that something seemed to be moving right behind him. He opened the front door and then waved to Sebastián. Surprised, he asked him what he was doing there. Julio explained what happened and ran to the back door to grab the lever. At that moment, Sebastián let out a scream as he looked at the front door. "Record with the camera! There is a man!" Julio turned around very quickly, but he didn't see anything. He told Sebastian that he must have seen something wrong and went back up with his companions. But while they were trying to open the door upstairs, they heard the car start up and make a lot of noise, as if someone was speeding it up as much as possible. They thought something had happened, so they went down to check. And sure enough, they found Sebastian behind the wheel. Blood was coming out of his nose and ears, and he didn't say a single word. He was in a kind of hypnosis. He didn't respond to them or let them touch him. He was gripping the steering wheel so hard that his hands were already completely purple, and the car would start burning at any moment if he didn't stop pressing the accelerator. At that same moment, they heard the door slam inside the premises, even the one at the entrance. It was clear that something strange was happening, but at that moment, the most important thing was to try to get Sebastian to recover. Lucas got into the passenger seat and managed to turn off the car and take the keys, but Sebas still wouldn't let them touch him. It took almost an hour for Alba to convince him, so they put him in the back seat and drove home. Since he didn't react, they decided to go to a hospital, and once there, they admitted him to intensive care due to a serious concussion. That was the last day that the three friends saw Sebas. They learned that he had left the hospital, but he never wanted to speak to them again. His family told him that he didn't want to leave the house and barely spoke to anyone. And upon reviewing the tapes, they themselves had seen that their friend was not lying. There was a man at the entrance to the Burger King when Julio came back up. After that incident, the three of them spent a while without visiting any haunted place. They were sad because they had lost a friend and they were still scared. Even so, they still wanted to explore that place thoroughly. And the first one who dared to verbalize it was Lucas. A year after his first excursion to the abandoned Burger King, he said, "I think we should try again." Alba's eyes lit up. She remembered the sensation of vertigo and at the same time excitement that she had felt when entering there. She wanted that, but Julio was much more hesitant. He felt guilty for not having believed Sebastian. Perhaps if he had stayed with him, nothing would have happened, and the four of them would continue to be friends as always. But they had to make a decision, and in the end, they ended up convincing him. They hadn't done anything like this in a year, but they kept all the equipment. They also didn't know if the place was as still as they had seen it the last time. But they had already learned that in these cases, planning may be of no use. They marked a day and prepared for a new adventure. Along the way, the three of them had doubts. Their parents didn't know where they were going, otherwise they wouldn't have let them leave the house. After what happened with Sebastian, no one wanted to hear about that abandoned hamburger restaurant. No one, except them, who were eager to cross that door again. And in doing so, nothing seemed to have changed. All the doors were closed, and they went back up the stairs to start upstairs. On this occasion, none of the three was left out. They had decided not to separate. The first area remained the same. The dolls were on the floor and nothing seemed to have moved from its place. They continued down the hallway and found that the second door was still locked. But this time, they were more prepared and had the leverage. Julio and Lucas tried to open it using all possible force, but there was no way. It was completely blocked. They tried for a long time, and then Alba decided that she had to go down the mountain. Only then would they be able to open that place. Her companions insisted that she couldn't go down alone, so the three of them went to the car to look for her. When they went up, when they were about to start cutting the wood of the door, Alba placed her hand on the knob again, and suddenly the door opened. It seemed like magic. They had recently been hidden it and had achieved nothing. She was the first to enter to inspect everything, and just as she walked through the door, it slammed shut again. Her companions stayed on the other side, very scared and trying to open it again. Just a few seconds later, Alba began to scream, "There's a man! There is a man!" Her screams were of terror. She asked for help and hit the door. Her companions began to cut the wood, but Alba's screams became louder and louder until they heard, "No!" And everything went silent. Julio sped up the saw as much as he could, and when he managed to open a hole, they saw it. Alba's body was on top of a pool of blood. She had a knife stuck in her heart. The two young men stood completely paralyzed. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. They completely broke the door and entered the room. They looked everywhere, looking for who could be responsible for that tragedy. But there was absolutely no one. They quickly dialed the emergency number, but there was no signal. Julio went out of the garden with his cell phone in his hand while Lucas stayed with Alba. He couldn't stop looking at her. She wasn't breathing, and her heart wasn't beating. He couldn't believe it. And suddenly, a scream from Julio brought him out of his thoughts. He ran downstairs to see what was happening, and then he saw how his friend was in the same situation as Sebastian. Hands on the wheel and the accelerator pressed. But this time, the car wasn't braked, so in a matter of seconds, he saw his friend crash into a wall next to him. Lucas ran to the car, desperate to snap Julio out of his trance, but the doors were locked. He knew he had no time to waste, so he returned to the store in search of something he could use to break the glass. Trembling, he searched desperately through the rubble and the remains of abandoned furniture. His heart was pounding in his chest, and he screamed over and over again inside. "Please, Julio, please don't leave me." Finally, his eyes landed on a piece of twisted iron, an ancient rusty object that looked solid enough to break the car window. He grabbed it and hurried back to the vehicle. A cry of effort, he hit the glass with all his might, again and again, until it finally shattered into 1,000 pieces. Without wasting a second, he reached inside the car and opened the door. Then he grabbed Julio, dragging him outside. But when he had it in his arms, Lucas' heart sank as he realized it was too late. Julio was cold and lifeless, his empty eyes staring into nothingness. There was nothing he could do for him. A wave of terror washed over him as he dropped his friend's body to the ground. Then in the midst of his pain, his head began to relate when those misfortunes had happened. First Sebastian, then Alba, then Julio. He realized that every time they separated, something terrible happened to them. At that moment, he was alone, and he knew that he could be the next to suffer an unexplained paranormal death. Fear enveloped him as he made a desperate decision. He knew he should call the police, but he also knew he needed to hide until they arrived. If whatever had caused Julio to crash was out, there, he was in danger. So he decided to run up to the play area where the dolls were, unable to face the place where Alba's lifeless body still lay. As he entered the room, his eyes fell on the damp stains on the wall. He approached slowly, watching as the shapes seemed to shift and morph before his eyes. And then, as if it were a flash of clarity in the middle of the darkness, he saw letters. The names of Alba and Julio were written there in the stains. His body shook as he realized what it meant. He realized he needed help, someone who could understand what was happening. Despite everything that had happened between them, Sebastian was the only person who could help him understand the truth behind it all. He hadn't wanted to speak to them again after what he had experienced at the burger, and his horrible situation accelerating the car, but he had to help him to survive. With trembling hands, he took out his phone and dialed Sebastian's number. His heart was pounding as he waited for someone to answer on the other end of the line. And then a familiar voice took his breath away. They were Seba's parents, but what they said left him paralyzed. Sebastian had taken his own life, jumping from the window of his apartment. The parents, between sobs, told him that they were at the wake. Lucas couldn't believe what he was hearing. His friend had always been strong. What had led him to do something like that? Just when he thought he couldn't feel more terrified, suddenly he saw a new stain appear on the wall that said, Sebastian. He would not allow the moment of his death to come. Not that day. He looked everywhere, shouting, "Where are you? Come out of your hiding place. If you're gonna kill me, come out and show your face. I'm not afraid of you. I will take revenge for taking all my friends away." But nothing appeared around him. He continued inspecting the place and went down to the top floor. And then, in the distance, he saw a flash of lights. He didn't know where to escape. If that ghost or spirit was outside, he would catch him, but if he stayed there, he would die cornered. He closed his eyes tightly and finally decided to face his destiny and go outside. Whatever happened, it would be the last time he would step on that Burger King floor. Suddenly, he recognized the source of light. It was an ambulance and the police behind it, coming to help him after his emergency call. He felt relieved, but as he noticed, he heard how, inside the premises, all the doors slammed shut again. It was clear that someone didn't want anyone to go in there. The sad thing is that it had taken him and his friends too long to realize it. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode!